Welcome to an archival reconstruction of the story of one of the U.S. tankers who fought on the Hellcat tank.
They called it the Lightning Cat. Fast, loud, and lethal. The German crews had another name, the Ghost Tank, because by the time you heard it, it was already too late. My name was Thomas Tom Green. In 1944, I was 22, a kid from Michigan who'd never been farther than Detroit. I ended up commanding a Hellcat in the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, a machine that, to this day, still echoes in my dreams. We weren't built to stand and fight. We were built to run and kill. People who've never been in a Hellcat think it was a tank. It wasn't. It was an engine bolted to a gun with a little steel shell to keep the rain off. The armor was so thin that a German machine gun could punch holes through it if you stood still too long. But we had something they didn't. Speed. 90 kilometers an hour on flat ground. A Panther could barely do half that. The first time I drove one, back in training at Fort Hood, I thought the thing would tear itself apart. The Buick engine screamed like a jet. The suspension rattled every tooth in your head. And when you hit a bump, the entire hull lifted clean off the ground. Our instructor, a grizzled sergeant who'd fought in Africa, just laughed and yelled over the engine noise, "Boys, this ain't armor, this is attitude." We learned to fight like hunters. Pop out of cover, fire, vanish. If the enemy fired back, he'd be shooting at a ghost. By the time we reached France in July 1944, the rumors were already out. German panzer crews were telling each other about a new American racing tank. They said it had no armor because it didn't need any. It was too fast to hit. They weren't entirely wrong. The Hellcat wasn't protection. It was momentum turned into a weapon. When we landed in Normandy in July '44, I remember the smell of burned diesel and wet earth. Sherman wrecks still littered the fields, blackened and silent. We knew we were the new experiment, a different kind of warfare. Where the Sherman tried to trade blows, we were told never to stand still. The manual said it plainly: mobility is survivability. Our first combat order came a week after we landed. Support the 101st near Saint-Lô. The roads were narrow, the hedgerows thick with ambushes. We moved at dawn, engines muffled, eyes glued to the fog. The Hellcat's open turret meant you could smell everything. The cordite from the artillery, the sweet rot of grass, the sweat of the men around you. You felt alive and exposed at the same time. That morning, we found our first Panther. It was sitting hull down behind a farm wall, gun barrel trained on the road. A Sherman platoon ahead of us had walked right into it, two burning wrecks blocking the way. I could hear the German engine idling, steady and slow, like a predator waiting for the next prey. My driver, Reggie Cole, looked at me and grinned. "Guess it's our turn, boss." We slipped off the road into an orchard, branches scraping our open turret. The engine growled low, the whole tank trembling like a nervous animal straining on a leash. I spotted the Panther through the trees, its turret shifting. At that distance, its gun could punch through 10 Hellcats in a row. I told Reggie, "Don't stop." We burst from cover, doing nearly 50. The Panther's barrel swung toward us, too slow. I yelled, "Fire!" Our 76mm roared, the recoil slamming through my chest. The shot hit the Panther's side armor, near the fuel tank. There was a pause, a heartbeat, then a flash that turned the whole horizon orange. A fireball climbed into the sky. Reggie whooped, his laugh half shock, half disbelief. "Jesus, we got him!" But we didn't stay to watch. Another gun was already turning our way. We kicked up dirt and vanished back into the fog, hearts hammering, hands shaking, ears ringing. That's how you fought in a Hellcat. Strike, vanish, survive. That night, as we parked in a barn and tried to sleep, I remember staring at the stars through the open turret. The others snored or smoked quietly, too tired to talk. Somewhere out there, the Panther crew we hit had families, letters in their pockets, dreams like ours. War didn't make you a hero, it just made you faster at dying. And yet, as I listened to the cooling engine ticking beside me, I realized I believed in this machine. Not because it was safe, but because it gave us a chance, a way to fight back, to outthink the enemy, to live another day. They called it the Lightning Cat. To us, it was more than a weapon. It was a promise that speed could save you if you were brave enough to trust it.
Before I ever climbed into a Hellcat, it was just a rumor, a whisper rolling through the tank yards and mess halls. They said the Army wanted a tank destroyer that could outrun a bullet. Most of us laughed. In 1942, that sounded like fantasy. Back then, we were losing ground. The Germans had rolled through Europe with Tigers and Panthers, machines that looked like monsters out of some industrial nightmare. Thick armor, heavy guns, and the patience of predators. Our Shermans, brave as their crews were, couldn't match them one-on-one. When a Tiger appeared, every man on the field felt it, that low growl in the distance that meant death was coming. So the brass decided we'd stop trying to make heavier armor. Instead, they said, we'll make something so fast it doesn't need armor at all. That's how the Hellcat was born. The contract went to Buick, the same people who made family cars back home. They stripped everything down, no heavy plating, no thick welds. Every ounce they saved went to speed. It wasn't just an engineering project, it was desperation turned into design. One of the engineers, a skinny guy named Harley Earl, once said during trials, "We're not building a tank, we're building a cheetah with a cannon." When we first saw the prototypes at Aberdeen, it didn't look like a killer. It looked fragile, small, open-topped, with armor you could dent with a wrench. But when the test driver hit the throttle, the thing leapt forward like it had been struck by lightning. Dust exploded behind it, and for a moment, everyone just stood there, stunned. The generals didn't smile much, but that day, I saw one of them, General Barnes, whisper to another, "If it holds together, this will change everything." And it did. They called it the M18, but to us, it was simply the Cat. Buick's people painted a small emblem on some of the early turrets, a snarling Black Panther's head, teeth bared, eyes red hot. It wasn't official. It was pride, a symbol of something wild, finally set loose. The Hellcat's 76mm gun wasn't the biggest, but it was enough if you knew where to shoot. Side armor, rear armor, tracks, that's where you aimed. We were trained not to duel, we were trained to ambush. Every move was a dance. Fire, fade, reposition, repeat. During training, our instructors made sure we never forgot what we were. "You are not knights," one shouted during gunnery drills. "You are ghosts. Strike and disappear before they even know where you are." We practiced loading until our hands bled. The loader's rhythm was sacred. Shell in, breech closed, fire, repeat. The driver had to feel the ground through the pedals, always moving, never stopping. The commander learned to see patterns in chaos, smoke, sunlight, the shimmer of a barrel in the distance. Every man in a Hellcat crew lived on reflex. You didn't rely on armor to save you. You relied on your brothers and on the machine. The first time I drove one for real, I realized what fear tasted like. The speed was intoxicating. The open turret made you feel weightless, but you also knew one shell, one lucky shot, and you'd be gone. You lived between heartbeats, between bursts of the engine. That's where the Hellcat existed, in the space where death couldn't quite catch up. We trained in endless dust, in the Texas heat, until the machine became an extension of us. And when orders finally came to ship to Europe, most of us were ready. At least, we thought we were. As we rolled the Hellcats onto the cargo ships in New York Harbor, one of the mechanics, an old Buick man with oil on his hands, stopped me. He looked at the machine, then at me, and said quietly, "She'll save you if you respect her, but she's got no mercy for fools." I didn't understand it then, but after France, I did. That was the Hellcat's gift, and its curse. She gave you the illusion of control, the rush of invincibility, until the moment the illusion broke. And when it did, it broke hard. But before that moment came, we had to test her in real fire. And France would be the proving ground.
By the time we reached the front near St. Lo, the war was already hell. France in the summer of '44 smelled of smoke, and wet hay. The fields were littered with burnt-out Shermans, shattered Panzers, and horses lying tangled in their own harnesses. Every road seemed to lead into fog, and sometimes into an ambush. Our unit, the 705th, was attached to the 101st Airborne for support. The paratroopers called us the Greyhounds because we never stayed still. They'd see a blur of dust, hear the roar of the engine, and then nothing but an echo. That was the Hellcat way. Our first real engagement came near a small village called Mortain. The Germans were counterattacking, desperate to break our lines. They had Panthers, dozens of them, moving through the hills like armored wolves. Our job was simple: stop them. I remember that morning vividly. The air was thick with mist, the sun just breaking through. We took position along a hedgerow overlooking a narrow road, the kind of road that forced even tanks to move single file. Perfect hunting ground. My crew, Reggie on the drive, Murphy loading, Ellis on the gun. Good men, scared but steady. The kind of fear that sharpens you, not freezes you. We heard them before we saw them. The low, heavy rumble of German engines, the kind of sound that sits in your bones. Panthers, Ellis whispered. I nodded. We waited. Through the scope I saw movement. The first tank cresting the rise, its guns scanning left and right. Beautiful machine in a terrible way, the kind that made you respect your enemy. Hold, I said. The second stretched into forever. The first Panther's turret turned, side armor exposed for just a moment. Fire! The Hellcat kicked like a mule. The shot tore through the side of the Panther, just below the turret ring. The explosion lit the fog orange. The second Panther halted, unsure, guns swinging wildly. Reposition, I barked. Reggie floored it, the Hellcat leaping backward into the trees. Branches cracked, dirt sprayed, the air filled with the acrid smell of cordite and diesel. We moved 200 yards, fast and blind. Stopped. Another flash in the distance. Our second Hellcat crew, Johnson's team, took out another. For 5 minutes the valley was chaos, explosions, radio chatter, the sharp crack of rifles from infantry lines. Then silence. When the smoke cleared, 4 Panthers burned on the road. Ours hadn't taken a single hit. We had danced around them, hit and vanished before they could even aim. Later, one of the paratroopers walked up to us, shaking his head. You guys fight like ghosts, he said. They didn't even know where you were. That word stuck. Ghosts. And soon it spread. Within weeks, German radio intercepts started mentioning lightning tanks, fast American machines that came from nowhere, struck like thunder and disappeared. Panzer crews began hesitating when they heard our engines. They'd waste minutes scanning for movement that wasn't there, minutes that we used to move, reload, and strike again. But it wasn't always clean victories. One afternoon near Falaise, we weren't so lucky. We'd taken position in a field, dry wheat up to the hull. A tiger appeared at the far end, distant but deadly. We fired first, hit its track, disabled it. Before we could move, it turned its 88mm gun on us. The world went white. The blast threw us sideways, ripped open the side plate, showered us with fragments. My headset filled with static and screams. Reggie's arm was bleeding badly. The engine still roared, half deafening, and somehow, by pure miracle, it still ran. Move, I yelled. He did. We limped into the woods, smoke trailing behind. The tiger burned its last shell into the empty field where we had been seconds earlier. That was the moment I learned the truth about the Hellcat. It wasn't bravery that kept us alive. It was movement, relentless, instinctive, almost feral. If you hesitated, even for a breath, the world would take you. That night we found what was left of Johnson's crew. Their Hellcat had taken a direct hit. The turret was gone, melted into the dirt. We buried him by the road, used a shell casing as a cross. No speeches, just silence. Reggie said quietly, "Fast don't mean safe, huh, boss?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the wreck glowing in the dark, and I realized this machine didn't forgive mistakes. It rewarded courage, punished hesitation, and demanded everything in between. Still, the legend grew. Reports came back from the front, Panthers retreating from Hellcat ambushes, Tigers hit from flanks they thought were safe. Even German infantry started calling them die schnellen Katzen, the fast cats. By fall, our battalion had destroyed more armor than any other in the sector. The generals were pleased. The men were exhausted. The Hellcat had become a symbol of American ingenuity and a monument to the thin line between genius and suicide. And for me, it became something else entirely, a companion, a living, breathing creature that carried us through fire and sometimes into it.
You never forget the smell. Burned rubber, diesel, and steel. It seeps into your clothes, your skin, your memory. No matter how many times you wash your hands, it's still there, a ghost that follows you home. By late '44, we had fought our way through France and into the dark forests of Belgium. The war felt different there. The hedgerows were gone, replaced by trees that swallowed light. Every turn in the road looked like an ambush waiting to happen, and every man in my crew carried the same thought: how long until it's our turn? The Hellcat was fast, yes, but in the Ardennes, speed didn't mean much. The snow was thick, the mud worse, engines coughed, treads froze, and our lightning tank became just another steel box fighting the cold. That winter, the Germans launched their last great gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. We were thrown into it head first. Orders were simple: hold Bastogne, keep the roads open, and don't die trying. I remember the first day like a bad dream. Visibility was almost zero, snow coming down sideways, wind cutting through our jackets. We could barely see the road. The radio crackled with broken voices, panic, confusion. No one knew where the lines were anymore. We set up near a crossroads, engines idling low to stay warm. The silence was unnerving. You could hear your own heartbeat through the static. Then the shells came. The first one landed 100 yards away, the second 50. The third hit close enough to lift the Hellcat off the ground. The shockwave punched the air out of my lungs. Snow, dirt, and bits of metal rained down on us. "Hit the throttle," I yelled, but Reggie didn't move. He was slumped forward, his hands still gripping the controls. A piece of shrapnel the size of my thumb had found his neck. No scream, just silence.
Murphy and I dragged him out, laid him in the snow behind the tank. His blood steamed against the cold ground, a dark red cloud in the white. The shells kept coming. We climbed back in, because what else could we do? That was the price of speed. You could move faster than death, but not forever. Eventually, it caught up. We lost 4 crews that week, men we'd trained with, eaten with, joked with, gone in seconds. No glory, no music, no last words, just a sudden roar, and then nothing. The replacements came. Kids, 19, 20 years old. They'd look at the Hellcat like it was something heroic, something invincible. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth, that this machine didn't protect you, it tested you. Every time you climbed inside, you made a deal with luck, and luck didn't last. One night, after we'd been pinned down near Bastogne for hours, Ellis finally spoke. He hadn't said a word since Reggie died. "You ever think," he muttered, staring at the fire, "that maybe the only reason we're still alive is because somebody else wasn't fast enough to take our place?" No one answered. The wind howled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, another engine caught fire, the glow painting the snow a dull orange. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the turret, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. Each sound was like a heartbeat fading into silence, and I realized that the Hellcat wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a coffin on tracks, one that chose its moment to close. But the strange thing was, I still trusted her. Every time I touched the throttle, every time I felt that burst of speed, it reminded me I was still alive, even if just for another hour. When the snow finally began to melt and the front lines shifted east, we were down to half our strength. Most of our original crews were gone. The new ones didn't even know the names of the men whose tanks they now drove. War has a way of erasing people like that. Quickly, quietly, efficiently. like tracks in melting snow. But the machine, the Hellcat, she remembered. Each dent, each burn mark, each bullet scar told a story we didn't have time to tell. And when we finally rolled out of the Ardennes, the men joked again. The engines roared again, but no one smiled the way they used to. We had learned what it really meant to be fast.
The war ended the way thunder fades after a storm, slowly, unevenly, leaving behind silence that felt almost wrong. When they told us Germany had surrendered, nobody cheered. We just sat on the hull of our Hellcat, smoking in the spring sun, listening to the wind move through the empty fields. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhaustion wearing a medal. They took our tanks first. The army said they'd be scrapped or sent to training ranges. When the trucks came to haul them away, I remember watching ours disappear down the road, engine coughing, turret still dented from a near miss outside Bastogne. We called her Lucky 7, and I swear, as she turned the corner, I felt like I was losing the last piece of myself that still made sense. I went home to Ohio. Same house, same street, different world. The people there talked about peace like it was a new car, shiny, untouched. They'd ask, "Was it really that bad over there?" And I'd smile, say something polite. How could I tell them that sometimes I still heard the engine idling in my sleep? They built memorials, wrote books, gave speeches, but the Hellcat didn't get a monument. She was too fast, too strange, too reckless to fit in the neat lines of history. She didn't win wars. She survived them, like the men who drove her. Years later, I visited a museum in Pennsylvania. They had restored one, painted clean, polished, standing under bright lights. People took pictures. Kids climbed on the tracks. I stood back, watching, my hands trembling slightly. It looked smaller than I remembered, gentler, like a ghost pretending to be harmless. A man next to me, maybe a teacher, was explaining to a group of students how the Hellcat was the fastest tank destroyer of the Second World War. He spoke with pride, like it was a trophy, and I wanted to tell him he was right. But that wasn't the whole story. The Hellcat was more than speed. It was fear, courage, and luck wrapped in steel. It was every heartbeat that almost stopped, and every friend who didn't make it home. It was the sound of the engine that drowned out the screaming inside your head. It was the reminder that sometimes the only way to live was to move faster than death itself. I walked closer, laid my hand on the side of the turret. The metal was cold, smooth, almost kind. And for a moment, I was back there, in the smoke, the fire, the roar of the engine, the voice of Reggie yelling "Go!" and the smell of burning oil in the snow. Then it was gone. Only silence and the faint hum of the museum lights above me. You spend your life trying to outrun what you've seen, but the truth is, you never really do. You just learn to carry it, quietly, carefully, like a shell that never explodes. Sometimes on quiet nights, I still dream I'm driving, the world rushing past, the wind in my face, the throttle under my hand, the Hellcat purring like she did the first time I met her. And for a few seconds, just a few, the world isn't over. It's just far away. And we're still young, still alive, still fast enough to believe we could outrun death.